Well done for last week, Year 3. You did a really good job. Today we're going to continue to learn about animal bones and skeletons. Now, think back to last week. What can you remember about vertebrates and invertebrates? Hopefully you remember that vertebrates are the animals with a backbone and invertebrates are the animals without a backbone. And then you further classified them. You thought about endoskeletons and exoskeletons. So we're going to start today just with a very quick recap of vertebrates and invertebrates, just to see what we can remember, to refresh our memories and make sure we've really understood it. And then we're going to divert the lesson a little bit into looking at animal skeletons. We're going to use some of our science skills, some predicting, some really good observations, and some justifying your answers. And justifying is a really good skill, whether it's in science or maths, because you're explaining your thinking and saying why. And then we'll finish the lesson with a little bit of looking at x-rays and skeletons and trying to put all our ideas together. Let's get started. If we think back to the other lesson the other week, this might help us remembering vertebrates and invertebrates. So vertebrates have a backbone, and if you remember, the proper name of the spine is the vertebral column. Vertebrates have a backbone. So in a moment we're going to look at a series of slides, a series of pictures, and you're going to use either your knowledge or your predicting skills to say whether they are a vertebrate or an invertebrate. Now you might want to go back to the PowerPoint for this, or you might want to do the predicting with us and think together. I'll go through each of the animals and I'll reveal the answers at the end. So the first picture is the dog.
Is Sleepy Byron a vertebrate or an invertebrate? You decide.
Our next slide is a worm. What do you think about this one? Is this a vertebrate or an invertebrate? Think about the category really carefully. I'll reveal the answer later. And what about the dinosaur? Think really carefully. Think back to our work on Mary Anning. What do you think? Vertebrate or invertebrate? I think this one might be far too easy. Perhaps I should have started with this one. What do you think? Vertebrate or invertebrate? And what about the fish? Some of you might know the answer if you had your fish for dinner. Have a think about this one. I'll reveal the answer in a minute. And what about a jellyfish? Think back to last week's lesson. And the last one for now, before I give you a little bit of thinking time, is a bird. What do you think about the bird? Is it a vertebrate or is it an invertebrate? Okay, here comes your thinking time. So how did you get on? Let's put our answers onto the table from last week. Did you think a dog was a vertebrate or an invertebrate? Yeah, you're right. A dog is a vertebrate. And what about the worm? What did you think about the worm? Did you think the worm was a vertebrate or an invertebrate? Yeah, you're right. The worm is an invertebrate. We're doing well. And what about the dinosaur? Now, some of you will know the answer to this one if you were lucky enough to go to the Natural History Museum. There was an amazing dinosaur called Dippy just inside the entrance hall. And if you'd seen that, you'd know that a dinosaur is definitely a vertebrate. Now, what about the human? I know, you're thinking Mrs. Tuxford's gone a bit crazy. Of course, it's a vertebrate. Now, what about a fish? Now, if you think back to last week, you'll probably remember the answer. Or if you've ever had fish for your dinner or for your tea, you may have actually had a whole fish, which had the backbone inside. So, it is a vertebrate. Now, what about the jellyfish? Again, think back to last week. You're absolutely right. It is an invertebrate. And I bet some of you even remember it has a hydrostatic skeleton, which means it's like a fluid-filled body skeleton. They're amazing. If you haven't had a chance to see how they move, try and find a clip on YouTube and just watch them. They're mesmerising. So the last one in this part is the bird. What do you think about the bird? Is it a vertebrate or an invertebrate? Tell me. Call out the answer. Yeah, you're right. It's a vertebrate. So let's pop that one there. Now I've tried to use some of the animals that we used last week to see if I could test your recall to check your memory, and I've tried to introduce some new animals to see if you could apply your knowledge. So you don't have to stop there. There might be other animals that you want to investigate. You might want to find out a little bit more about the different types of skeletons. So we're now going to go into the main task, the main part of the lesson, and we're going to look at some different animal skeletons in a moment. You're going to need to observe really carefully, so look really carefully for clues. What animals do you think the skeleton belongs to? Why do you think that? The really important part of this task is going to be the justifying, the explaining. Can you give reasons for your predicted idea? So you can't just say, I think that because it is, or I've seen it, I know. Try and explain what you can see. Imagine that the person you're explaining to has got no idea. They don't understand. They've never seen it before. You need to get your knowledge across to them to help them understand. Good luck, Year 3. This is tricky, but I know you can do this. So this is picture number 1. Now look really carefully. What bones can you see? Look at the shape of the animal. What animal do you think it could be? Look really carefully for clues. So look at the different body parts. What can you see? And what animal do you think it might be? What possibilities could it be? And then make a final decision. And on this side, say, I think this is the skeleton of A, and then give reasons. Can you try and think of a couple of reasons as to why you think that skeleton belongs to that animal? Good luck. Look really carefully. Now here's the second picture. A little bit more unusual, but think really carefully. Again, look for clues. What can you see? What makes this skeleton interesting? Justify your thinking and then make a decision. Make a prediction. What do you think this skeleton is? What animal do you think it belongs to? Now look at this one. This one's skeleton number 3. What can you see? Observe really carefully. Try and look for the features and then try and predict and explain what you think it is and why you think that. What reasons are there that gave you that idea? Good luck. And the last one for this slide is this one. Now this is an interesting one because if you look really carefully, you've probably got an idea straight away. But then as you think again, you think, but I wonder. So there's probably lots of questions going through your head. What do you think this might belong to? I'll reveal the answers in just a moment. I'll give you some thinking time. And let's reveal the answers. Did you work this one out? Did you realise it was a horse? If you look really carefully, look at the shape of the body. If you look towards the hooves, that probably gave you a big clue as to what it could be. You probably recognise the cranium. You probably recognise the vertebrae. There's the backbone. You can see the ribs. The skeletal system of the horse has the same functions as it does in a human. It's going to protect the vital organs. It's also going to provide a sturdy framework and support the soft parts of the body. Did you know a horse skeleton has about 205 bones? That's really close or really similar to a human skeleton. And what about this one? Did you know this one? This is the skeleton of a chameleon. Now if you look at them, they're incredible. Look at the vertebrae. Really unusual. Different to the humans. If you look back at your human skeleton and look at our spine, our backbone, you can see the difference. Look at the ribs. Look how much of the chameleon's body is actually the rib. But again, it's going to protect those soft parts, those vital organs. Well done if you guessed the chameleon. And what about this one? I bet you had a really good prediction or good guess on this one. But perhaps the challenge might have been whether it was a frog or whether it was a toad. Now, some of you may have looked this up. You may have looked on Google, or maybe the Woodland Trust, and you would have found out that frogs actually have longer legs. They're longer than their head and their body because they're made for hopping, whereas toads, their legs are shorter than skeleton. And if you look, you can see that the skull is attached to this really long and flexible spine or backbone. And look at all the ribs all running along that body all the way to the tail. And this allows the snake to bend and curl its body as it pushes along against the ground. It's amazing. You can see why they're so flexible. So I thought I'd give you a couple more pictures to try, because I think now we're on a roll. This means we're being really good evidence detectors. We're looking carefully for clues that we've seen. So there are 3 more skeletons here that I'd like you to try to predict. What can you see? You might want to label up some of the things that you can see and how that helps you to predict what it might be. Good luck. Look carefully. How did you get on? I bet you recognise this one straight away. The bat is really recognisable, isn't it? Especially if you look at these wings. You can see how the bones are light because they need to be able to fly. Now the second one, this was a little bit more tricky. I would imagine you either thought it was a hare or a rabbit, but it is actually a hare. They have slightly bigger bones than a rabbit and slightly bigger skulls or craniums. And did you recognise the last one, the lizard? Now, there are lots of different types of lizard, and you might want to do some more research on them. But there are so many other skeletons you could also try and predict and research, so the learning doesn't have to stop here. You might want to think about a monkey skeleton. Are all monkey skeletons the same? Now, before we finish, there's a few things I want to just introduce you to, and these are things that you might want to look up. One of my favourite museums is the Natural History Museum. Now, I talked earlier about Dippy the dinosaur, and some of you may have heard about Dippy the diplodocus. Some of you may have been lucky to have seen photos of it. Perhaps your parents went to see it. And this is a skeleton of a blue whale, and it's actually suspended from the ceiling, so it's hanging from the ceiling. So you can actually walk underneath it, and you can see all the bone structure. It's incredible. It's apparently 25.2 metres long. Now, obviously at the moment, we can't go and visit the museums, but you can look at this online. So with permission, you might be able to go onto the Natural History Museum in London and find out a bit more about this skeleton, which they called Hope. Or you can also find out about some of the other exhibitions. As I said, we're approaching the end of the lesson now. But before we finish, I want to look a little bit at the human body, because next week we'll be returning to the human body. I wanted to show you some x-rays, because they're incredible. So these are parts of our skeleton. These are parts of the human skeleton. And I wonder if you can work out which body part has been x-rayed. I'm going to give you a little bit of thinking time, and then we'll come back and we'll reveal the answers. Look carefully. Did you recognise the body parts? So this here is your knee. And if you remember, if we go back to the human skeleton, the knee is the patella. This one's the hand. That was quite easy to recognise, wasn't it? And these are your phalanges. This is your mouth. Some of you may have had an x-ray on your teeth, so you may have recognised that one really easily. And you can see here, there's your mandible, there's your jaw. And then lastly, this one's your rib. And if you look, there's your thoracic cage. And you can see that your ribs are going to protect your vital organ, which is your heart and your lungs. Well done if you worked those ones out. You really are bone and skeleton experts now. And you can find out more about x-rays and bones in Operation Ouch. These are some hyperlinks to films that I think you'll enjoy. Now, we really are at the very end of the lesson. You've done a really good job today, guys. Well done.